Okay, so it's my great pleasure to introduce Dungse Jampal Norbu. Dungse was born into a Dharma family in 1988 as the son of Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche and Elizabeth Mattis Namgyal. Did I get that right?
Namgyal, yes.
Namgyal, okay. He has traveled extensively in Asia, but he spent much of his young life in Crestone, Colorado, where he's still based. If you were to ask him how long he has been studying the Buddhist path, he would say, since I was born. Under his father's wing, he has received many teachings and transmissions, sometimes while the two were walking in the mountains above Crestone. Dungse Jampal spent 5 years studying Tibetan language and traditional Buddha Dharma in Bir, India, and now spends 100 days a year in meditation retreat in Crestone, Colorado, in order to deepen his experience of the practices of his lineage. Dungse Jampal explores the Buddhist teachings in a natural and relaxed way, almost as if encountering them for the first time, which can be surprising given his extensive training, and refreshing all at once. He is particularly interested in the challenges of establishing a practical worldview for today's youth, based on compassion and self-reflection. He is taught on Buddhism and ecology, the environment, as well as on the popular topic of mindfulness. In his case, he clarifies the difference between mindfulness as a practice and mindfulness as part of a path. You can see he has a good web presence. You can see a lot of his talks online. There is a website too that we can circulate for you if you like. And I understand that he will talk for a little while and then would be willing to take questions. So I'll just ask when that time comes, if you raise your hand, I'll come and give you the mic. You should know that this is being recorded for our university and Dungse's website purposes. So just let you be aware that this is being recorded. Okay, thank you. So without further ado, thank you so much for coming and for your friends for making this possible.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really my pleasure to be here. I received such a warm welcome from the school and students and teachers. A school is probably the best place to talk about ideas of the environment. There's no agenda at this time with me, and so I enjoy simply speaking and hearing what all of you have to say as well about the environment, social awareness, even Dharma, Buddhist teachings, because this is a place for learning, and learning openly shouldn't have any kind of strict agenda. At least, I don't prefer that myself. So, I thought I'd start a little bit by explaining, from my experience, a Buddhist background in the philosophy, and then move into how that relates to the environment from there. So, starting from some of the very, very basic Buddhist teachings, some of the earliest teachings that the Buddha ever gave, there is an emphasis on altruism. There's an emphasis on selflessness. And that emphasis carries on throughout pretty much all of the Buddha's teachings and all the Buddhist teachings in the world today, in all the traditions, because it is important to look at the foundation of a practice, the foundation of a tradition, when applying it to any situation. Not just in the details of application, but also in the intention, in the grounded heart, so to speak. I've had many conversations with people in my hometown of Crestone about the environment, and I'm often surprised at how little grounding there is in some of our own claims. Certainly it is important to be environmentally friendly. It's important to care about our communities and the way that we're affecting the world that we're going to live in, grow up in, our children will be in. But without some groundedness, it just seems like more hippie talk. And my town, Crestone, is known for being a hippie town. Let's say that well, this is Washington, I can say this here. And even the censor won't mind. The main export of, or the main source of income for my town is now marijuana. So it can be a bit ungrounded at times. So I want to explain this base. Any person who thinks about themselves in a narrow view, who thinks about only their own well-being, about their own benefit, the benefit of people close to them, and no one outside of their social circle, is bound to have some major challenges in life. Not because it is conventionally selfish, not because it's bad manners, not because it is good or evil, but simply because when we focus too much on our sense of self, when we really base all of our actions on protecting our sense of self, providing security for our sense of self, and really just trying to maintain good things all the time for our sense of self with a great deal of attachment, the world just does not cooperate with our intentions. And there's a great deal of suffering that comes from that. Always wanting good things for ourselves, it's a huge burden. It's a huge burden to be self-concerned. There's a sense of disconnection. And disconnection is one of the primary causes of, or not primary causes, but primary feelings that come up with clinical depression. A sense of disconnection, a sense of loneliness, isolation. It just doesn't lead to a happy life. It doesn't lead to a stable life, a stable mind. The emphasis on self in Buddhist teachings is really considered to be the source of all suffering. It is the cause of suffering in that everything we do that comes from the attachment to self solidifies our habits in a way that we will never, ever fulfill by seeking external enjoyments, kind of trying to rake everything in, rake everything in towards ourselves. I like this example. How many of you have something that looks like this? Okay, so a good number of you. How many of you are 100% happy with that? Wow. This is what happens when we seek happiness, we seek meaning, we seek connection through external things. There is no happiness that is inherent in a phone. There is no happiness which is inherent in money. There is no happiness which is inherent in anything we might try to rake in for ourselves, to make our lives pleasant, to make them stable, secure, rich. Because happiness just doesn't exist in these outer objects. Happiness comes from within. Happiness comes from not dwelling on that sense of self, not trying to rake things in just for ourselves, for our friends and family. That leads to disconnection. That leads to irritation. That leads to bad cell service. It takes altruism. It takes compassion to work with that very same attachment to the self. By extending beyond ourselves to other people through practices like equanimity, seeing all people as equal, loving kindness, wishing good things for other people, compassion, wanting other beings to be free of pain and suffering because we relate. We don't want to suffer. We're sure other people don't want to suffer. And having sympathy, sympathetic joy even. When other beings are happy, we can rejoice in that because someone is happy. We know the feeling. And to not care about how other people feel, at least in some way, or appreciate how other people feel, is again to feel that disconnection, that isolation. So this is the foundation of all Buddhist practice. Going beyond the sense of self to help others, to consider others. Maybe not even in any sort of grand charitable act, but at least to consider these things, to consider going beyond ourselves. Because whether it's a small action, whether it's a large action, the important thing is really to engage that attachment to the sense of self. And this doesn't mean we have to give away everything we have. This doesn't mean we have to get rid of our sense of self. It doesn't mean that we have to leap off the void, leap into the void and become one with oblivion. I believe I'm paraphrasing Nietzsche in this. It's just the consideration, the small acts or large acts, which constantly work against the attachment to the sense of self, which give our lives more meaning. And regardless of whether we are compassionate or not, regardless of whether we are attached to ourself or not, if we look very carefully at our relationship with other people and the world around us, we can see that we're not actually isolated. On a very logical level, regardless of how we feel, we are not separate. And so there is no reason to think that we are, and no reason to only focus on ourselves as if we are individuals. We have individual personalities. We have individual consciousness, spirits, souls, perhaps. But how individual is individual? How individual is disconnected from each other? How cool do you feel right now? I'm sitting underneath one of the vents myself, and it's pretty cool. You feel pretty cool? How does that make you feel? Does it change your attitude at all? Aside from just feeling a little tingly, do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel, it's so hot outside, it's nice to be under the vent? Or maybe you were outside earlier and you walked outside out of your house, school building, whatever, and you went, this is a very warm spring. What does that do to the mind? What does that do to affect our behavior? What does that do to affect our entire day? Because sometimes it is as simple as sitting underneath a vent. That outer conditions affect our mood. Outer conditions do have an effect on us. And if something like a vent can have an effect on me, my attitude, my engagement with what is around me, think of how much we affect each other on a day-to-day basis. Not just people you know, but even people you see or hear about. It's election season, and although I've never met any of the people who are running, they have had a pretty big effect on my life in the past few months. How disconnected are we really from our environment, from the people around us? I have heard it said that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Their attitude rubs off on us. Their behavior influences us. What they say sticks in our mind. Their ideas start to blend with our own. How different, how separate are we really when their behavior affects us so often? How much are you affected by your environment? How much am I affected by my environment? Because we do come from somewhat different environments. Just from Colorado to here. I have to say that I personally prefer cloudy, stormy, moist weather. How many of you say the same? Okay, so some of you, but not all of you. Because most likely you get enough of that here. While in Colorado, I get way too much sun. And I prefer something else. It changes my how I approach the day. And in turn, that will affect my influence on other people. Because it's not just that 5 people have influence on you. You have influence on everyone you meet, or everyone that even encounters you in a slight way. One of the conundrums of environmental change is that we really don't control anything with the environment. There may be a lot of talk that we do, but we don't actually control anything. We don't even control our own lives. We have tremendous influence in our lives, and everything we do every day, every moment, does matter. But does it actually control anything? Most of the time, we're not even aware how our actions affect our environment, how our actions affect the people around us. But they do, just as their actions affect us. This is a kind of feedback. A feedback where if our attitude is more self-absorbed, more based on attachment to self or people around us, and not on altruism, we can make a tremendous impact negatively on our environment. An impact where we don't really care if we toss the glass bottle into this bin or this bin. They look the same. Recycle. Someone else will do that. But what we do does make a difference. It makes a difference to the person who stands behind us, ready to throw all their food away or sort through what they have. It makes a difference to the people who work at a bottling plant who think, oh, there are less bottles today, this isn't going well. It makes a difference to, I suppose, the birds and the fish who encounter our bottle way down the line. And then that will always come back to affect us because we're not that separate. And our attitude greatly matters. Another piece of Buddhist philosophy is interdependence. That we all arise out of, we don't arise independently. We are not islands unto ourselves. And as we exist interdependently through the different causes and conditions which make up our lives, our parents, our family, the food we eat, you are what you eat, that lends itself very nicely to this philosophy. All the different conditions which make us who we are, an individual, so we think. All these conditions are not usually considered. And when they're not considered, we really don't have any basis for thinking about the environment as a piece of ourselves. I came from a very environmentally friendly high school. And whenever my parents left the water running, I rushed to turn it off. Drove them crazy. Always unplugging the sockets and making sure the thermostat is down, stuff like that. I didn't actually have so much of a personal connection with the environment per se. I just thought, this is what I should be doing. It's the right thing to do. And you could say it is. But I didn't have a genuine personal connection, which is okay. But having a genuine personal connection with the environment, feeling connected to all the people around me, feeling connected to my environment and all the decisions that I make and how those are put forth into the world, whether I see the effect or not, they do come back to me. And acknowledging that and having this sense of connectedness, that's not just about saving the environment. This is about living well, living a good life. Not that I can presume to tell you what living a good life is, but through my own reasoning, it does seem like a better life than being more self-absorbed. And I can only laugh because I look back at those days and think, wow, I was stupid. And I'm so happy to be part of something bigger than myself. I'm so happy to have some connection with you. That I am not disconnected from you. Because I was a moody teenager. And being a moody teenager, you tend to think that you are very isolated from other people, no matter how much water I conserved or compost I took out. There is something to living a life that is connected to other people in any subtle or obvious way, which is so much more meaningful, so much more pleasant. So as far as Buddhism and the environment goes, there is a strong reason to be invested in the environment, because that affects us, not just our bodies, but our minds. It affects the quality of life. It affects, to some people, whether life is worth living. Because although we live in a very comfortable situation here, there are places in India which are vastly different. And to them, sometimes life isn't worth living based on their environment, based on those conditions. I lived in India for about 5 years, and they haven't quite picked up the environmental concerns that we have, or they're just beginning to. Where my father's family originates from, in the small town called Bir, it's got some good influence. There are a lot of paragliders that go through the area. And so they now have a little recycling plant and an emphasis on being environmentally friendly. But when I lived there, the way that everyone disposed of their trash, and I think a lot of people still do this, is you go down to the river and you look in the river and you find a flip-flop, because it's pretty easy to find a flip-flop. And there's usually only one. They don't come in pairs. You take out the one flip-flop, usually the right foot, and you dry it off, take it to a small field or near a cow pasture or something like that, and you light it on fire. And flip-flops burn really well, like as well as Doritos. They burn really well. And you just set the flip-flop down, and then you start piling your garbage slowly around it. The bottles, the toilet paper, the bags of chips, even some lighters. Those are actually kind of fun because they explode when they get too hot, and you're like, oh. So it's has anticipation. And then this cloud of fumes rises up into the air, and you have to kind of duck because, one, you don't want to inhale all the that's right, we're being recorded. You don't want to inhale all the excrement of within the pile, but also because it's just toxic. Toxic plastic, toxic, yeah, it sucks when you breathe that in. And this is what everyone did to dispose of their trash. There's no landfill, there's no recycling, there's no composting. They didn't have a notion of the concept. Because they think that, we're just a small village. It doesn't really have that much of an effect. This is just what we do. There are no services around here. What are we going to do? Just let all the garbage pile up? We have to do something. But it's not that big a problem. See, it goes into the air. It floats away. And sadly, you can't really see the sky in India anymore. Not in many cities. Certainly not in New Delhi. And this is just a lack of awareness, a lack of information, but also just not thinking that we are that connected on a global scale, that thinking our own actions don't have that much influence. Bir is a very small town. And probably the people there just don't think that they're part of a bigger picture. They're very good people. They're very compassionate and kind people. And they really come from their hearts when they do good things for others. But there isn't a whole lot of self-reflection to how they are interconnected with a larger picture. So it takes some kindness, it takes some self-reflection, some contemplation, and a little bit of education to see that this is a means of living well as a means of surviving. At the same time, I can't presume to control the situation myself. I can't make people in beer stop burning sandals. Conditionally, I just don't have that opportunity, even though I know these things because of my Western education. And it's not really up to me to fix things. It's not up for me to fix the environment. Because I don't control anything. At the same time, I have infinite influence, just like all of you do. Influence in how I conduct myself. Influence in how I affect the people around me. So I put a good deal of effort and trust into that reasoning. And I try to live well. Have you ever heard that living well is the best revenge? I always thought living well was, living well. It's the best effect for everyone. It's great for everyone. Because it does influence everyone around us. And so can you. So, that's really what I have to say. And I think questions are probably the most meaty part of these gatherings. So I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Free to raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over.
And I'd also like to say that it doesn't have to even be on the environment. You can ask me anything.
I wonder about memorable lessons from your father, maybe early on, whether environmental or not, that have had sort of a important guiding influence or principle that's manifested itself over the years.
My father, also a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, hasn't really spoken explicitly on the environment or the environmental movement. Growing up in India, burning shoes was probably what he was surrounded with, and it just didn't, that wasn't emphasized in his community. And that's part of the whole education aspect. But his teachings on being interconnected and caring for the environment and keeping an environment uplifted have always been a foundation for people in our community to keep a space nice, to keep a space natural, not to overdevelop, not to mess with things too much, because there is something quite wonderful about the natural world. And we exist as part of the natural world, not against it. So his teachings have really emphasized that, even though they weren't explicitly on the environment. Yeah, I'd say. Actually, there's another point I forgot to make. It's on that man versus wild theme, it seems as if we're always in a competition with nature itself for the resources or the land. I remember reading some very interesting articles about, I think it's timber wolves in Montana. Have any of you read this? Some of you have read this? So it's about the wolves and the farmers and ranchers in the area, and as the wolf population goes up, they mess with the cattle, the ranchers and farmers are upset, so they go out and kill the wolves, and the wolf population dies down. But when the wolf population dies down, then the deer population doesn't go down, and the other herbivores, the population doesn't go down, and they overeat all the bushes and shrubs in the area, and then there's a lot of erosion, there's a lot of landslides, the forest starts dying away, it's not a healthy environment anymore, it really disturbs natural balance there. So it was a bit of a conundrum between preserving the man-made side and the wildlife side, about who should live, I suppose, or whether it was justifiable to go hunt wolves. And for a lot of hunters, they're losing their livelihood. Farmers are losing their livelihood because of the wolves, and you just can't say, tough luck, we need wolves, because they need to live. They need some way to live. And this brings up a very modern view of nature, that it is man versus nature, man versus wild. I've never watched that show, but I hear funny things about it. The idea that we are against nature rather than a part of nature seems to be a common view. Not that it is taught as a common view, it's just assumed as a common view, because there's that attitude that there's nature and then there's us. That's why we say man-made and natural. There's a division. Not that we are part of nature and we are making stuff, but there is a separation. The separation of species, the separation of people, it's very survival of the fittest, don't you think? I was surprised to read a while back that survival of the fittest, as it exists today, is not actually a Darwinian idea. He did coin the term survival of the fittest, but what is the fittest? These days, survival of the fittest is assumed that the creature is more deadly than the creatures around it, that it can dominate the other species, that it has less weaknesses, and therefore it can reproduce and survive. That's actually not what Darwin said. That's something that was picked up by an economist. I don't actually know the name of this economist, but I've been looking for it. And isn't that funny that the theory of evolution was hijacked by an economist, and that became the standard by which many people compete with each other? What Darwin actually said was survival of the fittest, fit being the species which has the best cooperation with other members of its species and its surrounding environment. Cooperation and connection, unity, being the standard for fitness, rather than against other creatures, working with other creatures. So, is it really man versus nature? Is it really survival of the fittest in a competitive sense? Or is it that we are becoming less fit all the time by separating ourselves from nature, by not cooperating with nature? We come from nature. Certainly, there is the means to support us. Certainly, cooperation is preferable. Because there is no separation. It's all that emphasis on the sense of self. My livelihood, my species, my well-being. That bear came and broke into my garbage. I will kill it because it's annoying. We do shoot a lot of bears in Colorado that go through our garbage. Not us, not me personally, not even our community personally, but when a bear is reported to have been in the neighborhood 3 times, then some service goes out and is obligated to kill the bear because it's come around 1 too many times. It's not like we mind. I mean, picking up garbage, we're doing that anyways. So it's the attitude which separates us. So a little more food for thought. Any more questions? Yes. The microphone's coming to you.
I have a loud voice.
No, we record it for posterity. So millions and millions of people in the future will be waiting on your every word.
So I'm concerned, I think, about your statement about the fundamental Buddhist belief of focus on self as leading away from happiness, leading away from satisfaction. And it makes me think of people who are struggling, people who have so little, whether they're in this country or another place, who have to focus on themselves every day to get health care, to get food, to stay warm, whatever it is they need. Their whole attention is taken up with themselves. And happiness is pretty scarce in such situations. So I wonder what you might say about that, because it's very hard to tell someone in that situation that the focus on themselves is not a good thing.
It's not that it's not a good thing, and I probably should have clarified that. Thank you. It's not that it's not a good thing. There is really no good and bad in this situation. There is simply what gives rise to happiness and what doesn't. Certainly, we must all work to some degree for our own physical welfare. Otherwise, we will be in pain. We will be more susceptible to disease. We will not be eating as well if we don't seek out the right kind of foods. Our minds won't work as well if we are not nourished or hydrated in that sense. So we do always have to acknowledge the conditions that we live in. Acknowledging the conditions we live in and having a really tight attachment to the sense of self is different. It's not about taking care of yourself. It's about the attachment to the sense of self. Plenty of people who are altruistic, who are compassionate, who don't really have a lot of that tightness, that clinging, do take care of themselves. They do live happy lives. You strike me as an individual who does take care of yourself and has compassion at the same time. You are thinking about other people. There's no contradiction there. Sometimes it feels a little bit like either or. You must choose. Again, this is more of an economist type thinking. This is a different model. Things aren't as mutually exclusive as they appear. in taking care of yourself, you can be taking care of other people. There are plenty of people that I know who don't fully acknowledge the effect that they have on the people around them, thinking that they're just not important enough. And they don't take care of themselves. By taking care of themselves, they could help the people around them. They could alleviate the worry, the concern that their family has for them, that their friends have. Taking care of yourself is an important thing. Taking care of yourself with the attitude that it's you against the world and having that tightness to the sense of self, that isn't bad. It just doesn't help in the pursuit of happiness. That's about it. There's no good and evil here. There's not really a right and wrong, even. It's just about how we are approaching our life. What works naturally, and just what doesn't seem to work. For some people, taking care of themselves might be a good thing, just based on their conditions, or it could be a bad thing based on their conditions. Mostly, it's about the attitude, whether or not that benefits the intention to be happy, the intention to help others. It's not so black and white there, which is actually quite helpful. It's a little more opaque than we would like it. We tend to like our answers quite quickly. Like, give me the 5-step answer to this. Well, we were talking about a book, or you mentioned a book recently, like 10 Steps to Enlightenment, or like Ultimate Happiness in 5 days or less, or something like that. We like that kind of stuff. The planet itself doesn't act on a fast-paced basis, step by step. We tend to enjoy that because it fits our busy lifestyle, it fits our schedule. And we hate it when our schedule conflicts with anything else. Again, we don't have to change our schedule, but we should have a bit of a looser attitude about how information is given to us, or how we see results in the world. Oh goodness, there was something on Twitter. It was another one of those climate change denial things. I think it was like Donald Trump saying it's snowing outside. Where is this global warming? And someone responded, like, I put turkey in the microwave. Or no, it was, darn. It was so funny, I can't call these things on hand. Anyways, I'm sure many of you will look this up afterwards. Yes. Oh, yeah, please.
I just ate yesterday. Where's world hunger?
Yes, that's the one. Thank you. I just ate yesterday. Where's world hunger? Great response. Way to go. I just like the political humor.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm very glad you're here. It's very nice to hear you speak.
Thank you.
You mentioned Twitter, and I thought of social media and Facebook with 1 billion people connected, and you had noted the value of interconnectedness as perhaps a mechanism of allowing happiness to ensue from that. How do you view the opportunity or characteristics of the phenomenal amount of interconnectedness that exists electronically today?
I'd say that, again, this is a more subtle aspect. It's not, Facebook isn't interconnectedness. It's connectedness. And people who are connected don't necessarily think that they're interconnected. That's why you can have such things as cyberbullying or harassment or most comments on YouTube. It's just not friendly because it just doesn't seem like it has anything to do with you. You can just throw that stuff out there. No one says these things to another person's face because there's a very real risk involved, usually, to insulting someone to their face. But online, you just throw it out there and it's like, oh, it's in the ether. Don't worry, the ghost in the machine will take care of it. But that's the attitude, that there is no interconnectedness. For every comment a cyberbully posts, someone out there is hurt. And that someone is going to be the 5 people, or the average, that someone is affected by. And that person is going to affect people, and that person is going to affect people. And sooner or later it becomes a national conversation, an international conversation. And then it raises concerns. It turns everyone's mood sour. And who knows, maybe that gives rise to new cyberbullies. Maybe it gives rise to a sense of hopelessness. Maybe it gives rise to depression. Because you turn on the TV, the radio, whatever, you see death, murder, harassment, environmental destruction, kittens, death. You know, it's enough to really bring you down. It's enough to bring everyone down. Yeah, kittens or puppies or cat videos, that kind of thing. Grumpy cat. See, even Grumpy Cat is grumpy. He's the guy who's supposed to like make you happy, and he's grumpy. Garfield, yeah, essentially. So all this has a far-reaching effect. And when you throw information out there just with the attitude of, I'm connected, I can shout at this person, but not interconnected where it comes back to me, then we have these issues, social issues. That's the difference between where we are now and where we could be with internet use. Crowdfunding is more of a recent thing. Crowdfunding is another one of those ways where you can just put something out there, but you also expect something back. And when you get something back, you kind of have to put your thanks back out there. There is a feedback. There is a feedback with 1 person, 2 people, 1 million people that you do not see. And because you do not see them, because there is no physical evidence in front of you that suggests what your actions may have been, you have to come at it from a logical perspective. You have to consider that you do have an effect and that they have an effect on you. You have to consider that you are part of something larger. The evidence isn't just given to us these days. I have a monthly broadcast where I give a small discussion, small teaching on live stream, and then it's recorded and put into a podcast. And I give it from Colorado, from our center. My my Sangha center in Colorado, and there are maybe 5 or 10 people there. I grew up with them. I know them very well, and that's easy. What shocks me to this day is that I meet people from Australia, from Europe, from every corner of the United States, South America, people who don't even speak English sometimes, saying how much they loved what I said that one time last month. And I can't get over that I do have an effect. It's just wild. And it's daunting. It's really daunting. And it's unpleasant even sometimes because it's out there. You don't know what it's doing. I don't know who responds. I don't know how they respond. And I'm constantly worried that the stuff I'm putting out there is having a negative effect. And the only way I can deal with how interconnected I am is to not make it about me. Because it's not. It's really not about me. I don't have control over a situation. I have infinite influence. And that works both ways. That way I can take care of myself, stay a sane person, while doing as much good as I can, which is my intention. It is my intention to help others. It is my intention to be kind, compassionate, altruistic, etc. And I can let that be. Because I don't need to fix everything. I don't need to do it in 10 easy steps. I may not succeed. I did my best. I have a limited amount of time on this earth. As just an hour or two ago, someone asked me a question. In a limited life, what makes you feel like you lived a good life, a worthwhile, meaningful life? And I thought it was a great question. I thought, as long as I am working with that attachment to myself, as long as I'm engaging with other people in an altruistic way, seeing this whole interconnected picture, I think that's worth it. I can't think of anything else I can do generally, which is more meaningful to me than that. Specifically, I could do different things. I could have met this person, I could have gone to this place, I could have talked here, I could have eaten this, I could have not ordered the eel for dinner, that kind of stuff. There's so many small things that I can do, but as far as big things go, that's what makes my life meaningful. The altruism, the self-reflection, and engaging with the world in a more interconnected way. And then I die, whatever that means, because who really knows? I've heard a lot of theories, but when I get there, like everything else, I don't think it's going to be what I expect. Things seem a certain way. But the world is much more open than that. Do you have any more? Yes.
Well, first of all, I want to ask what you're holding there.
Funny story. I'm holding Luke.
Luke?
Yes.
Who's Luke?
Well, this very nice man in the front row came up to me and gave me a little dog. His name is Luke. And he has inspired me to some degree to talk about cat videos and
Okay. All
other
right.
such things.
Well, my question was just on what you just said a moment ago about how when you were giving your monthly broadcast that you were worried that it would have negative effects, and that confused me. How would you imagine that it would have a negative effect?
I have a wild imagination. I would expect that putting out a positive message, you get a positive response. But not everyone shares my opinion. Even the Buddha himself, despite his messages of love and compassion and kindness, his own cousin tried to kill him throughout his life, Devadatta. And even under the guise of a student, he tried to kill him many times. And it was just that he had a very strong habituation to disliking the Buddha. And everything the Buddha said just drove him nuts. And it didn't even matter what the Buddha said. Again, the happiness isn't in the external object. It's not in the external person. It has to come from within. The Buddha himself said that I have given you the methods to achieve enlightenment, but you have to understand that enlightenment depends upon you. Devadatta most likely never took that as far as it could go. He kept trying for an external sense. The death of his enemy. He always saw the Buddha as separate, something that had to be eliminated. That was just his predilection, and I'm sure in future lives I hope in future lives he was able to overcome that. I don't know what might come back to me. But if something negative does come back to me in that sense, I still did my best. And I can be happy about that. The point of that statement, what I said earlier, is just that I don't know 100% and I don't control it. But I have confidence that it is a predominantly positive message because I've just seen it happen over and over again. People are happy to hear positive things. People are happy to hear that they are connected. And not only to hear these things, but they think about them, they consider them themselves, and they are able to understand it themselves, and then they're even more happy. Even more joyful. Because it's not something that I say that lasts. It's what they reflect on. It's what they take in. It's what they consider very carefully and find to be true with their own experience, which really determines that connection, that joy. And that was true for me too. I grew up with this stuff. I heard about interconnection and compassion. I heard about it all my life. And at a certain point, I actually had to think about it. And when I thought about it, it's like, oh, this is what they gave me like 15 years ago, and only now do I actually get some of it. Now I understand that they were not just trying to tell me stuff because, I was a little kid and they could influence me. They were actually giving me something very precious. But I had to mull it over myself to see. The Buddha really just gave away diamonds. He gave diamonds away to everyone he met. But those people had to take the diamond, put it into a polisher, and see for themselves that it was actually a diamond. These are very precious teachings, precious concepts. Not just even from the Buddha. These are messages which follow most major spiritual traditions. Compassion, interconnectedness, altruism. So many traditions emphasize this for good reason. They are more precious than diamonds. A diamond doesn't give you the means to live a meaningful, happy life. Only you do that. It has to come from within. It has to be developed, polished, cultivated. Because we tend to have some pretty bad habits, culturally or socially, personally. We just have some habits, and that's fine. But it takes some polishing. It takes some altruism to rise above that to all the wonderful interconnection it could be. Well, which it is, but we have to see that. Yeah. Yes?
I have two questions.
Mhm.
My first one is, well, in January, I watched Cowspiracy, and I became aware of the amount of water that's used to keep animals alive and the land and the pollution, and became vegan myself. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on veganism. And
I like veganism. I don't think I could really do it myself because of, again, just the conditions of my life, traveling and such. It's not always a vegan-friendly town wherever I am. That being said, I like veganism more for its environmental aspect than for any kind of spiritual inclination. Because if I eat lettuce, something was sprayed in order to grow that lettuce. Some rabbit was electrocuted by the fence that keeps them away from the lettuce. Some insect was beheaded when the lettuce was dug up or the soil was tilled. It's kind of inevitable that something is going to suffer a little bit, like wolves and deer, and the plants and the natural world. The situation is such that you can't win. Nothing stands on top definitively that doesn't kill anything and isn't killed themselves. So I don't try to eat vegan for that reason. A lot of people do, and it's great. It's wonderful from probably a spiritual perspective as well as an environmental perspective, just from their own compassion, their own intentions. But I don't do it because, one, I just don't have the right means to do so, and also because I tend to be a little proud of myself whenever I do eat vegan for even a short amount of time. And again, that's like me controlling a situation, and I really don't. And I have to pay some respect to the insects which go into my food. That being said, I try to eat vegetarian as much as possible.
thank you. And my second question is, what are your thoughts on meditation?
I love meditation. Meditation in its most basic form, actually, you mentioned mindfulness. I'm going to get into that a little bit. Meditation in its most basic form is simply self-reflection. And self-reflection is incredibly important because without self-reflection, there's really no foundation for the rest of all Buddhist practice. There must be some self-reflection in order to see where our mind is, what it's doing, where our attitude is, what is negative, what is positive. I don't mean negative and positive in terms of good or bad, but just in terms of what's working or not working in my connection to other people, in my pursuit of happiness. So meditation and self-reflection, incredibly important for that. These days, there is the mindfulness movement, and mindfulness is being emphasized in many different many different places, but mindfulness, to me, is not meditation. And it's funny how often that this topic just goes blows up into a huge debate between more traditional Buddhist communities and more New Age communities. Mindfulness is incredibly important. Mindfulness, again, like meditation, is one of the foundations upon which we recognize where we are. It's how we see how we're engaging. It's a kind of self-reflection. It's like watching our words, how they affect other people. Watching our diet. How are we eating? How fast are we eating? What attitude are we eating with? Is it just to pork it down, or is it to eat to live? How are we approaching a situation? Mindfulness, like self-reflection, one of the bases of all meditation, all Buddhist practice. Issue being that often that's all it is, self-reflection. Self-reflection and just seeing what we're doing. For instance, I will pantomime here. I am drinking the water. I am mindfully drinking the water. I feel the water go down my throat and into my stomach. I set the water back down. I left a small ring on the table. That's mindfulness. And although it can reveal quite a bit about how we treat things, where our state of mind is, there's no emphasis on compassion. There's no emphasis on altruism. It is just mindfulness. And a lot of people love mindfulness because, it's clever, it's fresh, it's non-committal as far as the spiritual path goes, which is convenient. And it's great that it's out there. It's great that mindfulness is such a movement now. It's unfortunate that it doesn't go farther. It's unfortunate that meditation in yoga studios and city parks and Tai Chi lessons and stuff like that the meditation doesn't go farther. There's no altruism. There's no letting go of that sense of self. Breathe in the good air. Breathe out the bad air. Your body is infinite. Your body is one with the universe. I hear these things and I think, okay. That's it? No compassion, really? It's not that these forms of meditation or mindfulness are negative at all. They're wonderful, and people benefit so much from them. I have friends who are working with mindfulness and meditation with veterans and PTSD, people who are victims of sexual abuse. So many people benefit incredibly from this. I'm just slightly worried that it doesn't go far enough. That's all. And it's only because I come from a background, I come from a community where the altruism is so heavily emphasized, where traditional practice is so heavily emphasized because we see benefit in it. Not just because someone told us to, but because we have taken it in, contemplated it, and we see the benefit of it. And that's really just myself as the product of a traditional path, a traditional lineage in a modern world. I do not discourage mindfulness by any means. I do not discourage basic meditation by any means. And I'm so happy that it is flourishing to the degree that it is. I just want to throw this out there perhaps to challenge a few people in a positive way, perhaps to motivate, but really just so that the information is out there. Not in a competitive way, not that there's traditional and non-traditional, just as a furthering of that practice. So, yeah. Speak for a long time on that. Do you meditate yourself? Oh, wonderful. Well, good. I hope I haven't taken too much away from that experience, because it is great. It is wonderful. And yeah.
Could I just ask as a brief answer, okay, so you said you see what's going on with the meditation today popularly. How for a layman briefly, because I know you could talk all night about this, can you redirect what is currently being considered meditation in the yoga classes, et cetera? What would you throw into that thinking?
I wouldn't throw anything into it, because
Okay.
it's important that meditation somewhat exists how it is. Because not everyone wants to engage on a traditional spiritual path. It's something that, even though I was born into it, my family does it, and even though I had some definite fast track help getting into, I had to really work for it myself. This isn't something that, we go out and we pick at people to like suck them in to our Buddhist ways. I like that idea though. It's such a funny image in my mind. Like how would we even do that? This doesn't work. I had to work for this, and that's because I had a connection and I had motivation to get into this. The meditation which is out there meets the needs of the people. And that's what it does. That's what yoga studios do. They meet the needs of the people. I'm throwing this out for those people who are in a yoga meditation group and are meditating and think, how do I go further? But that's not offered by the yoga studio. The person who wonders, how do I connect this to a spiritual path or to living meaningfully beyond myself or just beyond sitting and breathing? I'm throwing it out there for those people who have the predilection, who have the intention or inspiration to go farther. And that's it. Again, no good or bad. It's wonderful that everyone even has the slightest experience of meditation, because just that alone brings so much to our lives. It brings so much to our school systems in places where not meditation, but just sitting quietly for a short period of time, like reflection time, has been instituted. It's done so much for communities all over the world. And I definitely would not want to jeopardize that by saying, you're not doing enough. It's just where I'm coming from, what I have a personal connection to, and what I hope to offer to those people who are interested. That's it. Any more questions? Yes. We get this side of the room.
Great. This actually trails off quite nicely to the last question about meditation. And I was curious, I've noticed that the more that I learn about the environment in a scientific and also a spiritual way, I kind of feel a greater pull towards being in nature. And I was just curious if you had a preference in terms of where you like to meditate, and if you meditate, in nature in any capacity, and if that changes your experience in any way.
I would like to get out and meditate in nature a bit more on a daily basis. Even for me, sometimes it's hard to justify driving out to the mountains and neglecting friends or lunch meetings or whatever to sit on a rock and stare at the ground. That's how it appears outwardly. And I don't think it is just that. So I try to do it as much as I can. But it's hard to get out there and be in nature sometimes. And so I've tried meditating in less obvious places, like an underpass, or next to a parking lot, or maybe I shouldn't say the third one. In an unusual place, which I probably shouldn't have been legally. But at the same time, I also have a great opportunity to be in meditative retreat about 100 days out of the year, 3 months out of the year, down in Crestone, which is a gorgeous natural setting. And I do spend most of my time in nature on those retreats meditating. And I can tell you that from the difference between meditating in a city, meditating in nature, once you reach a certain point, they're identical. Because it's not about the outer world. It's not about even the inner world. There's no great separation. There's no great distinction. So it's uplifting and insightful no matter where you are. That being said, usually it's much more conducive in nature. Usually you feel better in nature and less distraction in nature. But also, much more intense. Meditating where you hear the familiar sounds, where you hear things that are not so foreign, like a white noise machine, I suppose. It's easier to meditate at an even pace. In nature, sometimes you really feel how small you are. And then you feel how big you are. But it's a bit of a leap between those two. Yeah, that's a good question. And also sometimes it's fun to find a really pretty rock by a lake and meditate. It's just like a movie. Like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon movie. Like I feel like something could happen at any moment. I could fly out across the water. It can be cool for that reason too. And pretty much anything that gets you out there to meditate, right on. Yes.
You mentioned in your earlier remarks that you had been affected to some extent by the presidential campaigns. Could you elaborate on that?
I don't know. let's say that, again, this is one of those tricky situations where you don't know how what you put out will come back to you. Actually, I think I even had a broadcast where I challenged one of the candidates to do something. He still hasn't gotten back to me. Sometimes the state of the world is overwhelming. And that can take you in different directions. Often I feel scared, worried, hopeless, helpless, as if the world is about to come to an end. And most likely people on the other side of the political line feel the same way. That can take me in two directions. It can be a challenge, which gets in my way sometimes when I'm living my life, or it can be a challenge that I overcome, a challenge that I rise up to and try to include in my meditative practice. Because even politicians I don't like, politicians that scare me, the implications of the political race, the implications of the gridlocks, the lack of cooperation, the hate speech, the divisions between people, the just being provocative for the sake of making everyone angry. Again, on either side of the line, I have to include these people in my meditations. They are not actually separate from me, no matter how much I wish they were. We do have an effect on each other. They have an effect on me, I have an effect on them. We are not that different, or we're not that separate. Manifesting very differently, but still not that separate. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the earlier first basic practices the Buddha ever gave was equanimity, seeing everyone as equal, seeing everyone as human. Coming from different circumstances, having different conditions, having different opinions, ways that they affect the people around them, but really not being so separate, not being that different in their own search for happiness, in their own desire to be free from suffering. It's ignorance that leads us to be so different from each other. And that's a shame, but it's not something I'm going to shut down around, hopefully. So the political campaigns, although they may worry me at times, although I do really fear at times, it is also a means to which I can practice. So I don't think I need to name any names, do I? Okay. I don't think he's listening anyways. Yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned India earlier, and that you couldn't see the sky in India. But isn't that situation kind of a product of hegemony and colonialism, and that saying that there's sort of a change in attitude needed is kind of putting the blame too much on kind of individuals rather than looking at the sort of global sort of economic structures that India was thrown into in terms of having to construct itself as a sort of nation state with markets and such?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't mean to imply that individuals are responsible. I don't even mean to imply that small communities are responsible. Just that there is connection. And certainly we all have to jump in where it is needed. But I can't say that to everyone, because not everyone will agree or listen. So that being out of my control, all I can do is work myself, while seeing the necessity that everyone has to jump in. Again, it's the control and the influence. I try to influence as many people in my own community as I can. I tried to influence as many people as I could in the community of beer, and it is a much more environmentally friendly town now than it was before. But you are right. A socioeconomic restructuring is necessary, most likely to keep everything at an even keel, to get us out of this trend towards warming or whatever disasters may be in the future. And just fracking alone, the idea of Oklahoma having earthquakes is a bit nerve-wracking, because Colorado's on a fault line, and we have a lot of fracking. I don't think Oklahoma's on a fault line, is it? Do you know? I don't think it is. And the idea that they get earthquakes and Colorado on a fault line might be heading that direction. It's worrisome, but it's something that we all have to jump in on. And I think that a perfect society, a perfect system of government and economics has to come about through mass altruism. There is no other way. A socioeconomic reform will have opposition, always. And it is only possible to have a genuine change when everyone is on the same page. That's impossible with the current climate, with the current attitude of our representatives, politicians, etc. It's survival of the fittest out there. So they're not abiding by survival of the fittest, the actual one. So again, it's not necessarily something I control, but something I hope to influence. And it brings the dilemma of this current era to mind, but also it brings about, in my mind, the great power that we have in altruism, that we have in the Buddhist teachings, and that we have in living well. There is a lot of power there. And it's really just a matter of taking advantage of that. So I have a whole nother spiel for politics and stuff like that. I can't say I've fully contemplated that along with the Buddhist teachings. But again, everything can be linked there. These teachings link to everything: politics, environment, healthcare, medicine, family structures, social justice, equality, technology. It applies to everything, which is why I can come here and just talk about Buddhism and environment and whatever, because it can be applied. Altruism, kindness, compassion, always relevant, no matter what situation, and this reasoning helps to prove it. This reasoning of interconnectedness helps to prove it. It's not just me sitting here going, breathe the compassion in, breathe the compassion out. It's not me making an assumption because my parents told me so. It's not making an assumption because I belong to a lineage. It's me speaking because I see the connection. I see the benefit. And I have felt the benefit myself. And I cannot see any situation where it does not apply. And that's not for lack of trying. One of the Buddha's other teachings was, examine my words like a goldsmith examines gold, very carefully, making sure it's 24 karat. I've taken in the words through my studies in India and through my time in meditation, retreat, nature, office building, car park. I am constantly testing the Buddha's words, constantly testing to see if they are true. And only by testing them do I gain any kind of confidence in their true value. So that is what brings me here.
We have time for one or two more.
Okay. Oh, I think we're probably good. I'm sure there are some people who drank a little too much before coming into the room today. So thank you very much for coming.